All right, what is going on, everybody? It is episode number 13 already of the Chasing Waypoints podcast. I am your host, Victor Orellana, or however you want to say it. We are honored to have a special guest this time around. We are doing another In the Bivouac, and this time around it is with none other than Alex Martens of Rally PanAm and Konflict Motorsports. So, been trying for a couple of weeks to get this one going. I know I've been teasing about it for a little bit, but a lot of great information. Alex obviously been busy working on some new suspension stuff coming up, so absolutely stoked to hear a little bit more about what he's got going on. I'm waiting to go actually out into Texas and actually get some stuff done, so this should be pretty fun. All right, let's get this thing going. Alex, you there?
I am here.
Hey, what's going on, sir?
It's been a wild few weeks, sir. How about yourself?
Same.
Good to hear. To hear.
But you work in a much funner environment.
It's been, yes, it is. I am very fortunate to do something that I absolutely love. But man, ever since I'm sure you saw in the news, Texas got hit with this massive, very unusual storm and the subsequent fallout that has been facing not only my business, but pretty much every business here in this great state of Texas has been a challenge to overcome with, shipping delays and hurdles and just the snafus that it created. But it looks like we'll be through it at the end of this upcoming week. So I'm excited to get this week done and move on.
Yeah, get back to it.
Get back to it for sure.
Yeah, yep. It's definitely crazy. I saw it. I mean, we were talking, I think you were at 700 feet or something like that, right? And got snow?
Yeah, the shop's at like an elevation of a little over 700 feet.
That's nuts.
Yeah. We got one freezing rain, which dumped like 1.5 inches of ice on everything. And then at the shop, we got 9 inches of snow. And then we got 2 more bouts of freezing rain after that, all in like a 7-day period. And, we're in Texas. We're supposed to be wearing flip-flops and board shorts and T-shirts about this time of year. And, we don't have snow plows or, sanding material, machines or anything like that. So it literally shut, Austin down pretty heavily. And I mean, gas stations were out of fuel, grocery stores were out of food. I mean, it was a wild time, but we had it pretty decently, but others didn't have it so great. But overall, we're, looking forward to it and having you come out, of course. We're going to have a good time when you come out.
Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to it. We figured out with the plane tickets, it's actually cheaper to jump on a plane with my forks than it is to ship them via FedEx.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And much more fun, too.
Yeah, of course.
Way better backstory. Now, I'm just a little nervous about walking through the airport with a case that may look like it contains something else. But
I've done it a lot. You will get a few weird looks, but you're going to have to check it underneath. So, it's not that bad. I've tried to fly with shocks quite a bit, and I've gotten through a few times. A few other times I haven't. I've never had anything confiscated other than tools. The TSA definitely is a big fan of snap-on tools, and I've learned to not fly with my good tools anymore because they will always rifle through it and take some stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but you'll be good.
All right. Well,
yeah, you'll be good.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. It's been a while since I've been on a plane. I hear it's a little bit different now. But
yeah, they're empty.
Yeah,
they're empty. It's that you have that row all to yourself. So it's a little bit unique. I've flown a little bit. In fact, I have to fly up to Illinois here very soon. Anyway, and when I was in LA last, totally spaced. Totally forgot about my return. I mean, I didn't forget about it. I was just too busy and tried to get everything done and. Expected to show up to LAX. I usually always try to fly into Burbank to try to avoid the big crowds. This was an LAX flight and I was in Ventura County to LAX is about 45, 50 miles, somewhere in that range. Usually it's an hour to an hour and a half. We made it there in 35 minutes. Was able to Like I literally was through security in under 5 minutes and like literally walked right on the plane. So it's actually like really nice. I mean, it's an unfortunate situation, but flying right now isn't that big of a deal.
Huh. Yeah, this is definitely going to be interesting. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Going out to Texas and see what the landscape's like out there. So actually, with what we just started talking about, I wanted to talk about Rally PanAm first.
Sure.
A little bit about, tell me about the background. I mean, Scott Bright, he was one of the first in the Bivouac episodes that we did, and he mentioned about doing classes and working with you guys and doing this. So give me a little bit of background on that.
So, my introduction to rally racing was when Jonah Street was actually with Rally PanAm. Rally PanAm shifted hands, through a few different guys or groups of guys to where it's at right now. But I got introduced to Jonah. I actually met Jonah Street when I was living in Southern California and riding motorcycles. He at the time was riding a Honda and like living very close to Jawbone Canyon. And, he happened to join a ride. And this was when he was racing for Honda, racing down in Baja, and everybody was like, hey man, that's Jonah Street that's riding with us. And so, I got to meet him. Years later, I was working at
looks like we got a quick drop out there of internet. Alex, you still with us? All right, we'll give it a sec to come back. But talking about Jonah Street, I happen to know somebody that has that bike currently. Actually, supposed to go riding with him tomorrow. I got a feeling it's going to be a little bit chilly in the morning, though, about 39 degrees. So, waiting here. It looks like he is connected or disconnected. Not sure what's going on here. A little bit of technical difficulty, but let's see if we can get him back in here in just a second. Yeah, there we go.
Victor, are you there?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I don't know what transpired there. My apologies.
Yeah, no worries.
So I was working in another motorcycle shop, and Jonah called up and was trying to raise funds for Dakar. And then years later, I moved up to Seattle, and I actually got to meet Jonah again and got introduced to Rally. He was riding for he was still riding for Rally PanAm at the time. And then, as we were kind of like an adventure bike specific shop, my personal background's always been, off-road riding or racing. And so I made a call, and I called up Dave Peckham at Rally Management Services, and he had just acquired Rally Management Services, and ICO Racing is making the the tripiometers and the compass heading computers and such. And I was like, look, I'm a huge fan of Dakar. I used to watch, the videos of Dakar racing and rally racing with my dad when he would get them on like VHS tapes when I was a young kid. And so, I was like, look, I just started my business, or, I'd been in business for a few years. I was like, look, I can't cut you a check for 10, 15, 20 grand. But what I can do is offer some services, right? Like I could help the team out. I'll give you some mechanical support down at the rallies, and, just take whatever cut you would pay a normal mechanic and just put that back to the team. And, that'll be my contribution. So I started doing that with Dave, got to know Dave pretty good. And, he made, introductions to me, introduced me to Scott, Ian, Factory Phil Bowman, a handful of guys, and really just kind of immersed myself in the rally scene on the support side of things, working with them, and had a great time. I mean, you work the hardest. I think we did 13 or 14 guys, riders 1 year at the Baja Rally, and I think we only had 2 mechanics. So, it was up to like 3 or 4 every night, sleeping under the truck, and, just absolutely loved all the aspects of getting these guys to the finish line. And, there's a lot of emotional support as well as mechanical support. So like I've made some friends that like at the events, very successful white collar type workers that, needed some additional motivation in ways that they were probably not used to getting it. And, thought that I made an enemy. And then 3 months later, I get a phone call saying, hey, I hated you at the time, but you pushed me. You're the only reason I finished the event. Thank you so much. And so it's really rewarding on a personal level. And, I have road books. I've raced some events, underground rallies and stuff like that. And rally racing is like enduro racing without timekeeping and such like that. So it transitioned really good for me. I'm mediocre, I'm a below average rider, and then a somewhat mediocre navigator. So I could typically hold my own pretty well, which is an advantage.
That's how you do it.
So yeah. So, Rally PanAm, the way that kind of came about was that was originally started by a guy named Charlie Rossio and Rob McElroy. Then it transitioned to Dave Peckham's hands. Dave Peckham, since retired the team, moved on. And while it was just kind of sitting there idle, I was like, well, hey, we can't have this, this United States upper echelon rally team just kind of disappear, right? That would be such a shame. So we brought it on with the intention a little bit different than what their original intention was, to get guys to Dakar, right? That was the end goal. They used the local rallies as practice grounds and such like that. Our philosophy, or the way that we wanted to move forward with it, is kind of treat it in a very organic nature. Let's offer the support to the public so they have the resources. So, the biggest thing that we hear from enduro riders, Grand Prix off-road riders, is it's so costly to go and do it. And so, some of the guys that I've worked with in the past is, well, if you're complaining about the cost of the equipment, or you're complaining about the cost of the entry fees, rally racing's not for you. So let's face it, to go do Baja Rally or Sonora Rally, if you're an average rider, right, like a weekend racer type guy, you're going to have to neglect your family. If you have one, you're going to have to neglect your family's, yearly vacation funds to go racing for a week. And so we kind of wanted to bring people in and kind of show them that. And that's really where working with guys like Scott. Scott gives back so much to the community in so many different ways. And we've always done that, like in the operation of our business. We do fundraising activities. We've always done trail maintenance days, and we've, always tried to give back in ways that we can. And so when Scott and I started talking, he's like, look, I really want to do this school. I think we have the opportunity. Let's do it for free. And, it's been really successful. And so introducing people that wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to go rally racing or spend the money right up front and go enter a race to learn how to navigate and, kind of throw that first rally away as just a learning experience. With Scott bringing on the school that he does, it allows people to kind of get their toes wet, see what they do. We give them the resources. There's Rally Navigator, there's Tulip. You could make road books right outside your back door. You could, do your research on the internet and stuff like that, and, kind of give people the tools to really see if it's something that they want to pursue further. Mm-hmm. Then with Rally PanAm, like I said, the direction that we were originally planning on going has shifted a little bit. A lot of that has to do with me having young kids at home and, not really being able to dedicate as much time or resources towards the team that I would really like to. There's definitely plans in the near future to do that once my kids get a certain age and could devote a little bit more time to projects like that. But right now, really what we're doing is, being that resource, answering people's questions, steering them in the proper direction, and, bikes setups, really whatever they need, or making the introductions to people that, or companies that we may not offer, making introductions to guys like Matthew Glade at Rally Management or Rally Moto Shop, and so on. And so, really kind of right now, we're really only doing support services. We have worked with, Scott and Wes Van Nieuwenhuis, in offering them support and getting them to the events and providing them the resources that they need and such like that. But really, it's really just getting clients, guys that want the support, whether it's a fly and ride package or just a mechanical or even just a transport package, to go to these events. And, either we transport their stuff and they do like a Maui Moto type thing, or we do mechanical support for them, or they rent a bike from us that's fully prepped and ready to go. And then they just fly in like a rock star and have fun.
Make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and this is, it's huge because they're obviously the sport of rally has gained a lot of recognition now with Braybeck twice now on the podium, top spot last year and then this year second. It's kind of fueled that fire, and I think it's gotten more people interested in it. And the ability that, like how you guys have, is to be able to have the rally school and be able to network people into this environment. I think it is absolutely huge. It was because of you that I ended up talking to Matthew Glade from Rally Moto Shop, and it was like the conversation. I was just like way further than what I ever thought. Like, this is such a good resource, and he's so willing to lend a hand, and he's a racer too. Everybody that I've talked to, like you and everybody's just
it's Matthew. Matthew's kind of one of those guys that you meet once and you're friends with him forever, right? Like he's a special guy. He is super passionate about the sport. He's innovating that company and bringing on different products, different services, developing his own stuff. And that was one thing that I learned immediately off the bat when, there used to be this rally, this underground rally that was put on in Utah. And, the who's who of the rally scene would kind of show up. I mean, not guys like Braybeck, but, a lot of really talented riders would show up, and people within the industry and such like that. And, somebody said it to me there. I think it was my first year there. He's like, this is like 95% of people in the U.S. that rally are here right now. And there was like 35 of us, or maybe 40 of us. And it was like a really small, eclectic group. And one thing that was very, very noticeable right off the bat, you have to give back to the sport, right? And so as something that's been, ingrained in me as a young adult growing up by my dad, who's a rider, and then also brought into our business, is you have to give back to the sport. So coming out with innovative products, innovative technology, innovative things, or, being a resource. You always have to, the moto community is so small as a whole. Not just rally, but I mean, moto, off-road, desert, everything in between. It's a small community. So, with the challenges that we're facing now in regards to, it's an easy way to put this. When I was growing up, it was totally acceptable for like a parent to come home and be like, hey, honey, I bought some motorcycles. We're going to take the kids out and go riding, and, we're going to camp out and do these things and such like that. Nowadays, that doesn't really happen, right? With the green movement, and, you might not be socially accepted within your community, or, whatever it is. So motorcycling has changed. I started riding when I was 4 years old. I'm 38 now. So I've been riding a while. And, the shift that I've seen has been huge. And I mean, it's going to be just as huge in, my children's lifetime. So it'll be interesting to see. But it was very apparent that, giving back to the rally sport in one way, shape, or form, whether it's on a monetary basis or, innovative or support or whatever it is. And with that, I've never met anybody in the rally scene that wouldn't give the shirt off the back to help another racer. I mean, I've literally seen guys roll brand new bikes, a spare bike that they possibly had, or a brand new bike out of a bike, out of their Sprinter or whatever it is. And hey, we're going to yank this motor out and I'm going to give it to my competitor. Like, you don't see that in many things. So rally's a really unique sport, and it's growing. I hope it continues to grow. I mean, we have guys like Skyler, Andrew Short, Ricky Brabeck, all those guys that are going out and doing what they're doing and being successful in, one way, shape, or form. It's, I hope that it continues to grow.
Yeah. I definitely agree that it will. I mean, and you mentioned a good point, and I completely say so. But yeah, in talking to Skyler and his story and how he made it to Dakar, originally with the help of Garrett Boucher and Garrett Off Road and all of that, and it's like there's a lot of stories that are more relatable. You have, you see Brabeck and you go like, yeah, he's been on the Honda team, he's been a factory rider for so long, and then you have Skyler, who's every bit of factory talent, just doesn't have that backing yet, and it's just absolutely. It shows the wide scope of people that are in this sport and can get into the sport and can do some really amazing things. I mean,
for sure. It's look at Ricky, right? Like, I don't know Ricky on a personal level in any way, shape, or form, but as an outsider, I grew up in Southern California and District 37 and Hare and Hound and such like that. Like, Ricky came on as like a SoCal desert rat, right? Like a SoCal desert bro. And, he kicked ass and, didn't really at that time didn't have the professionalism behind it. Right. Mm-hmm. And then obviously, he got picked up by JCR, and now look at who he is. I mean, he won Dakar, right? Like, I mean, it's huge, and he's an absolute professional on and off the track. And the same thing with Skyler. Like, I'm hoping that something happens for him, because as an outsider, he's the nicest guy in the pits. He's an incredibly talented rider. He's an incredibly talented mechanic. And has risked everything to make it happen. And so, to finish the top 5. As a privateer, and, we can only hope. I saw that he was on a plane the other day, like a big 747 or something like that. It was empty, and I was like, oh man, I hope he's going to go get a factory ride or something like that. So
I hope that's the testing ride right there.
Yeah,
on my
exactly.
way to testing, without saying I'm on my way to testing.
Yeah, I hope it's something like that, because he deserves every bit of it.
He does. Yeah,
for
absolutely. Sure. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that too. I mean, it was I got to meet him at Baja Rally and work with him and Garrett, and it's absolutely cool. And it's just the outside looking in. Sometimes for me, I kind of walk up to somebody and I'm like, I wonder how this is going to go. But you look at them and you think like, but once you talk to them, they're like, both of them are just so approachable and so willing to just spend time and talk, and it's just absolutely crazy. And I think, that is one of the things that makes Skyler, I want to use the term dangerous, but the fact that he can wrench, he understands the bike very well. He's like a natural at navigating. I mean, he makes it seem like with my time at Baja Rally, it almost made it seem like we told him where the waypoints were. I mean, he just is so on point,
Right.
And like anybody else, there's the occasional off or whatever, but it's just they're few and far between for somebody who just got started. So,
yeah, well, he's a smart guy, and he's the full picture. I mean, I don't know Skyler on a personal level either, but as an outsider looking in and interacting with him and with the limited interactions that I've had, it's he's one of those guys that you're just rooting for constantly. Yeah.
I will never forget that last clip where he's coming to the line at this year's Dakar.
Oh yeah.
And it's just, it's like you're right there with him. Like, you just understand his story and how long or how hard he had to work to get there. And it's just, you're like, yeah, that's absolutely all his. So rally schools and things like that. I mean, do you have anything on the calendar for
Yeah, so I've been talking with Scott. So we're kind of changing up the platform. So it's very much Scott's school. Just to make that clear, like it's very much Scott's school. But Scott's a business owner. He's a dad. He's a racer. His son's racing GNCCs, and so he can't devote necessarily the time or resources to it that he would probably like. So that's kind of where our relationship kind of jives. So I can't really dive too far into it, but basically, this COVID situation, has altered things for what we would all probably agree for way too long. But we're going to shift things around, like the Rally PanAm website's getting redone. Basically, what we're going to do is, let me stop there. let me stop there. And we'll have to circle back on that. But we have some really cool things that we're going to do and make it a lot easier for people that maybe can't travel halfway across the country to go attend one of these. So we got some things in the works that we'll probably pick up and help quite a bit.
Nice. Yeah. And that's like with the schools popping up, Skylar's been talking about or kind of mentioned it when I talked to him, and there's a lot popping up, and I'm glad to hear that it's like at the forefront. And like you said, it's not just kind of dying on the vine. You guys are still working on it and still doing it as time permits.
Yeah,
because you kind of have a whole nother business going on too.
Yeah. I mean, that's what pays the bills. Rally PanAm definitely does not pay the bills. Yeah. It's typically a loss, but it's kind of one of those things where that's giving back to the sport, and sometimes that's just what it is. And it could be worse, right? Like spending a week in Mexico, having fun, like-minded individuals, and getting to see new places. It's not the worst thing in the world, but
that's horrible. Why would you ever do that?
Yeah, it's horrible. But Konflict. That's what pays the bills, and keeps the roof over our heads, and what we've been working on for about 10 years now.
Nice, man. That's crazy. That's a fast 10 years, I bet.
It feels like yesterday. Yeah, it really does. It really does.
Yeah, I definitely see it. So, with that being said, let's talk about Konflict.
Yeah. So Konflict, now that I'm a little bit older, I was mid to late 20s when I kind of started Konflict, and the name it's called Konflict because it was literally born out of a conflict. I was working for another suspension shop, and that owner's moral compass wasn't necessarily properly aligned. And so he and I had a falling out, and, it was kind of one of those things. I was previously working in the automotive industry. And then when the housing market issues in late 07, 08 kind of hit, I was without a job, and I had a riding buddy who I rode with like every weekend that started a suspension shop. So I went and worked for him after, he had been in business for 2 or 3 years, and then went and worked for him. And I was with him, I don't know, like a year and a half or somewhere in that time frame. And, took him from like a sub $400,000 a year shop to, close to $1 million, or if not above. And, with success came drug use and some other things that were not necessarily appropriately done. And so he and I had a falling out, and literally started the company because I was pissed off, right? Mm-hmm. Like I was frustrated. I was young. I was full of piss and vinegar. And I was like, well, this is a business that's going to be out of a conflict. And so that's where Konflict came about. And the K in the name, I was literally in the business licensing office in Southern California, and they're like, oh, there's already a Konflict Motorsports that's associated with like vehicle repair, like automotive repair. And I was like, oh shit, I really like that name. Let's, just put a K. And, that's where the K came from. It was as simple as that. And then shortly thereafter, I went to suspension school and, started playing around and testing. And then I had moved from Southern California up to Washington State at this point in time. And, it just kind of grew organically. I mean, I was literally, like, my wife has pictures of me when we moved to Washington State. Like, we didn't investigate or really do anything. We're like, we're going to move here. And, she found an apartment and picked an apartment. And when we showed up, you had the apartment was on this lake, and it was over this lake. So you had to walk down a dock 100 feet and then kind of hang a left and go into our house. And so when I started this business and guys started coming to me there, I had to push their motorcycles down this dock, and I didn't even have a garage at the time. So we would move the kitchen, the living room couches to the walls, and I'd put tarps down, and I would work on motorcycles in the living room, and then doing suspension in the kitchen sink. I would plug the kitchen sink up, and it was wild. And kind of moved from there.
You said wife, right? You married her.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That was yeah. We've been married a long time. Yeah, we've been together a long time, and we've been married a long time. But
awesome.
Kind of made those typical entrepreneurial sacrifices that you have to do. I mean, we had no money and didn't have any tools, and I worked 2 jobs, and then would do suspension on the side, and it just kind of transitioned to finally I was doing it full time, and got in a shop and moved shops, always growing into bigger spaces and such like that. And then had 2 kids, or had 1 kid when we were up in Washington State, my son. And then, the upper Northwest, at least on the west side of the state, has changed a lot in the 10 years that we were there. And so when we had our son, it was kind of we didn't want to raise him in that environment. So, when we moved to the Pacific Northwest from LA, my best friend had moved to Austin, Texas. So it was either we're moving to Seattle or we're moving to Texas. And we moved to the Northwest. We were there for 11 years. And then about a year and a half ago, maybe coming up on 2 years, I guess it's actually 2 years, moved down here, built a shop, got everything going, and, here we are.
Nice. Well, that's good. And it's all been growth. And I mean, I can only imagine, doing cleaning suspension parts in the kitchen sink.
No, it's been a wild time. I mean, it's 100% sweat equity. And I mean, nobody gave us any money or, any of those things. And it's been a grind for, 10 years. And, we've been very fortunate, to have support from the community and, our colleagues within the industry. So, the growth that we've seen, we feel very, very, very fortunate to have and lucky to have.
Yeah. Well, and it's an amazing thing. And I can tell you, at least in my end, right, working when I worked at San Diego BMW Motorcycles and just being around the whole adventure bike thing is you and what you have built is literally a household name for suspension.
It's wild. It's really wild, to be honest.
Nobody, I know who Precision Concepts is, but I know that because of Johnny Campbell and that venture and how that got started. But nothing as widespread as what I've heard with Konflict. And I'm sending my suspension to Konflict. Oh, Konflict is doing this for me, or Konflict is going to do that for me. And it's awesome. It's just absolutely crazy how big it's grown. So well done on that.
We appreciate it. We've been, like I said, we've been really fortunate, and sure, I'll be the first to admit I'm not a businessman. I'm learning. I've learned as I've gone, and the first 5-6 years in business, man, it was I learned some really valuable, costly lessons, up front, as most entrepreneurs do. But it's been, we've been very fortunate. We kind of fell into the adventure segment. When we moved to, the Pacific Northwest, we, were planning on just doing dirt bikes. It's kind of what our plan was. And then when we got there, the Pacific Northwest is adventure bike central. And after turning down so many people saying, hey, that's not us, that's not what we do. Finally, I kind of did it, and I bought an adventure bike. And fell in love with it immediately. And, it just kind of, I think we hit it at the right time with the growth and, the start of the growth of the adventure bikes. So we got really fortunate in the timing and the placement of where we were, and, really devoted all the resources we had to developing those bikes and such like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. What was the first adventure bike? What'd you get?
990 Adventure.
990. Okay, so it's an oversized dirt bike.
Yeah. I just bought my sixth 990, and I've had 3 Super Enduros in that time frame, and got an 890, and or 890 I'm going to be picking up here relatively soon, and I had a multitude of mixtures of bikes in between, but we do things with Konflict a little bit differently than most traditional suspension shops. Is when a new model bike comes out, we go out and we buy it. We bring it in the house, we build it, we ride it, we test it, we develop it. And then, at the end, we're knowledgeable of, not only the suspension platform, but the entire chassis, the engine, and such like that. So when a client does call, it typically starts, suspension related. And then it's like, oh no, you need to do this, you need to do that. You need to call these people and get these things and such like that. So we're a well-versed suspension shop, not only in suspension, but also in the products and services that we may offer, or even some of our colleagues offer and such like that.
So not just suspension, but you're more of a researcher, which is awesome. And definitely something that I see, in the people that would come into the shop and talking and all that stuff. Like, we would end up spending a lot of time, because it's like going into the internet, people would rather talk to somebody that's a shop and an expert than go to Facebook, because Facebook or any of the social media platforms, any question you ask nowadays is literally like asking, what oil should I run?
It's interesting. I can't say a name, but I recently talked with in the motorcycling testing platform. As far as people doing this for a living, the amount of support that let's call them media guys, what they get nowadays to what they used to get 10 years ago or 15 or 20 years ago is so changed, where now, the influencers on social media and such like that are, they're getting more support than the media guys are. And then on the flip side, like I said, I won't say any names, but, there's some people that are considered very in the adventure segment, right? Like the moto guys, those guys are pretty well vetted. It's such like that. But in the adventure segment, in some of the publications and what they're considered knowledgeable about and such like that, even if it's just a social media influencer or such like that, is, their skill set is, so minuscule, right? Like, I mean, like when you talk to a guy like Skylar, or, guys that have, try different year chassis and the same motor, and like they have a specific feel for the flex of a frame versus billet versus cast triples, or billet versus cast lugs, and all the little nuances that it takes to set up a bike. When some of the social media influencers that are being held in high regard by the general public in being knowledgeable on how to set a bike up, they're really far from. And then you see guys on the flip side that have all that knowledge, that have, worked at magazines or been editors at magazines and such like that. And you find out the support that they're getting. It's like, wow,
it's almost,
it's changed quite a bit.
It's interesting. So I have some experience in that in RC racing, and I see that with what you're telling me. I totally see it is that, we would have guys that were sponsored full factory rides, as weird as that may sound for toy cars, but you would ask them, hey, what's the chassis flex like? What does this thing run like?
Sure.
What's the best answer you could get out of them was, oh, it's dialed. It's dialed.
Right.
You don't even need to know, dude. It's just dialed.
Right.
Okay.
You know, that whole RC car thing. Like, you know, when I was a kid, I had like an associated RC10 or whatever it was. You know, little electric car, and one of my guys that works for me, he's like into competition rock crawling and these RC cars, and then he's acquiring like all these different machines, and he just got this like 5th scale. The thing weighs like 40 something pounds. It does 65 miles an hour out of the box, and you know, like we're jumping it out in front of the shop, and he's talking about stuff like that. He's like, oh, you know, like, you know, I need to change the oil viscosity in the shocks and do this and do that, and I'm going to stiffen the chassis here and that, and it's like, yeah, oh, you know, that knowledge just doesn't stop and keeps going.
No, and that, you know, it's. I'll go with it. It's sad to see that in with social media and what that's created, where it's harder for people to break out that actually know it. Right? They're busy out riding and figuring these bikes out rather than posting, you know, these cool shots, you know, and videos of what's up, you know.
I think the public's starting to see through it a little bit. I think the value that was once considered, you know, influencers and social media guys are people that had, you know, big followings. I think the general public's kind of starting to see through that a little bit. And so we'll see. We'll see. It's just, you know, we don't want to see, you know, editorials like, you know, the guys at Upshift or, you know, any of those other magazines, you know, like we consider those guys or hold them in high regard, and we want to see them do well.
Yeah. It's like you, I think the roles need to be further defined. Hey, I saw this picture on Instagram. This is cool. Okay, now I'm gonna go check on, you know, what Simon's doing from Upshift. You know, did he ride this bike? Did he see it? What's the opinion on it? You know, and I saw like they were just out with Quinn Cody right down in Baja, riding those bikes around, and it's just absolutely amazing. Like I went through the article, I'm like, okay, this is like, you know, Quinn Cody obviously knows his way around a motorcycle.
I think that goes without saying.
Yeah, I couldn't. Like I always say, I couldn't catch him if he was only allowed to go to second gear. You know, he's still that fast, but you know, it's the ins and the things and the information that you can gain from that is stuff that you can bring back and relay that to the general public and make the end user smarter about the bike that they're riding. Oh, this is why it's designed this way. Oh, this is why they did that.
Yeah, well, what Quinn has done for the adventure bikes here in the U.S., specifically for KTM, has, you know, I mean, you're seeing it, you know, with the release of the 790. I mean, that was Quinn's baby, and now the 890, and you know, KTM does their R&D. They do their hard work, and they listen to the consumer base. And you know, it was like 4 years ago, I was at an adventure rally, and this team from Kiska, you know, KTM, Kiska, they came over and they wanted to have like an hour-long conversation. And, you know, they did that to a lot of the colleagues that were present at that rally. And they traveled and went all over the world and said, hey, you know, what are we really looking for? What's going to be the next bike? And, you know, that's what the 790 was. And then with having Quinn involved with the R&D of that application here in the U.S. has just dynamically changed what these bikes are really made for. And now we're seeing the fruits of their labor, and obviously they're being successful because of that.
Yeah. I mean, now like it was one of those things, like when I got the 790, it was like the second round, because I think they had the 19s and then the 20s. I got one of the first 20s, and it was, you know, it was like 3 or 4 of them that I would see maybe around the streets. And now maybe it's just if owning one, it's like I see them everywhere. And
yeah, they're phenomenal bikes. Yeah, they really are.
It was crazy. I like when I first got it, I had my F850, and I was like, oh yeah, the F850, finally, you know, this and that, and really great bike on the road. And now I see that separation more now owning the 790. But as soon as the 790 touches dirt, with that zero experience, I'll be the first to say I know nothing about suspension clickers. I could dial in an off-road 4-wheel race car. I could do that. I know how to do that. I grew up in that, but I can't do that on a bike. That's why we have you.
Sure.
But you can just tell that bike was straight up bred for dirt. And it
absolutely,
as big as it is, it hides its well so stupidly well. It's just absolutely crazy.
Yep. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
there's room for improvement.
There's always room for improvement. Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
And so, speaking of improvement, so I guess I'll come see you in a couple of weeks, but you've got the fork cartridge kit.
Yep.
We were talking a little bit about that, and obviously I was stoked that once you released it, I started talking to a couple friends, and I'm like, Diamond Light coating. I started throwing all these coatings and things at them, and they're like, it does this and it does that, and everybody's looking at me like, huh?
Yeah, it's it's
so let's talk a little bit about the coating. Like, talk a little bit about what I'm getting. I kind of already know, but just I guess it's why did we do some? Because I was floored when you told me about like what Kashima coating does, what I may notice with that, the Diamond Light coating, all of that stuff.
So this is the first chassis. So we've been in business for a decade now, right? And we've done a lot of suspension, right? We've had people from all over the world send their suspension into us. And, one of the things in being able to take this business as far as scalability it goes is, eliminating the hands-on, right? So having a tangible product that we could build a dealer network with, throughout the world and offer some. In the suspension world, typically there's compromises that are being made, right? So you're not going to have a fork that's going to work good on a motor track, that's going to work, desert racing, that's going to be good for hard enduro or anything in between. So, you can always have to kind of pick your segment as to, what you're focused on and then build the suspension around that. And so we wanted to offer cartridge kit or release our own line of suspension and have a tangible product that we can build a dealer network with and really be able to offer that to the public. Now, when you try to tackle something like that, you always, one of the smart things to do is, look at what's being offered within the community. So we did that. We, not necessarily for the 790 or 890 application, though that is definitely, what we focused on, but really kind of see what other people are doing or what other companies are doing, what their products are offered. Let's bring those in-house. Let's test them. Let's get the data. Let's see what they're doing. So, we've done that. We sent suspension out and, to some of our competitors, we bought suspension components, we brought them in-house, we tested them, and really kind of determined where each one shined, where it didn't, where the pros and cons were, and then really sat down and kind of made a checklist. And, to be honest with you, I had a notepad sitting next to me on my nightstand for 8 months. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and I'd be like, gosh, we need to add this. We need to have that. We need to do this. We need to do that. So as the suspension on the 790 and now 890 features a version of the Explorer fork that's found on the majority of the dirt bike models, on both the KTM and Husqvarna models, it's, different stroke lengths, different collapse lengths. And so historically, what we were doing is we're changing base valve pistons, changing the mid-speed compression assembly, and kind of keeping the functionality of the fork as is, because with the way the fork lugs are designed, there's not really any room to put a compression adjuster in the bottom of the fork. So you still had one leg that kind of did everything, and then you had a compression leg that was kind of a dummy leg that really didn't do all that much. So, when that bike was released, we kind of developed our settings utilizing some components or our components and kind of offering that to the public. And, I'll be the first to admit is while it was a substantial improvement over stock, it still left some to be desired. So that's really where, being able to make that jump, make that hurdle into manufacturing things and, having a checklist and really being able to address all of the shortcomings. And, I don't have any manufacturing experience, very little, to be honest. And so I reached out to somebody within the industry that manufactures suspension components, and it was Jeremy Wilkie at MX Tech Suspension. And I said, Jeremy, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. Here's the checklist of the things that I really want to have in it. And he's like, let me think on it. I'll get back to you. And, 2 or 3 weeks later, he calls me back and he goes, let's do this. And so, basically, he's manufacturing the components for us. We are the exclusive dealer or distributor of those components. They are set to our specifications. So, the valving settings and the features and all of those things are all designed in-house at Konflict Motorsports. And then he's just being the manufacturer for us. Mm-hmm. With that, one of the first prototypes that we received kind of had the same functionality as OEM. So you had compression control in one leg, rebound control in the other. And, we used a lot of the technology that he has, implemented into his cartridges or suspension line into the development and utilization of those items in this setup. Mm-hmm. I still felt it could be better. So we went back to the drawing board. We made some alterations, and we got to where we're at now. And so I'm really, really happy. In fact, we just had the professional photographer in the shop today taking photos of the components for the press release that's going to be going out on Monday. Nice. What we've been able to implement in this fork design is something that none of our other competitors or anybody has been able to achieve on this style of fork on this application. So to start, we brought in preload adjustable fork caps to his fork cap design. So, one of the things is preload adjustable caps always get beat up. So to eliminate that, or it fades, the color fades just due to the anodizing being out in the elements. So the center knobs we actually sent to Japan and had Kashima coated. That way, you could stick a wrench on it, you could reef on it. You're not going to scratch it. You're not going to nick it or mar it. Then the outer is, type 2, class 3, 286, hard ano, looks really clean. And then you have 11 millimeters of preload adjustability on the fork springs itself. Mm-hmm. Then when you come to the cartridge design itself, so we have the quality of the components is much vaster. So the machining tolerances are much greater than what comes in OEM. Tolerances are on point across the board. The materials that we're utilizing, the type of aluminums and the hard anodes or the sliding surface bushings and such like that is all top shelf components. What I would consider a kit style suspension. And then in the development of that, like I said, we're utilizing some technology that's been featured previously in what's been offered for the dirt bikes, but not seen in the adventure bikes. So MX Tech has what's known as the Huck valve system, which is a bottoming control circuit that's actually tunable. That is a completely separate tuning circuit than your traditional high and low speed compression, which is where you'd kind of make up for some of that in a certain sense. So you have a needle and orifice style bottoming circuit. Then we introduce sub-valves into the base valve assembly. And then what's really neat is we were actually able to do the conversion where you have compression adjustment in the bottom of both front forks, rebound adjustment in the top, and then that way it's balanced properly throughout the system. Mm-hmm. And then, with the type of materials that we're using, I will say this, with our cartridge, with the springs that we're utilizing, the fluids that we're utilizing, we are able to pull over a pound of weight off the front end of the bike with our setup. So, that's something that a lot of people do look at. And, we have clients that spend $3,000 to $4,000 to outfit their bike with titanium hardware and axles and such like that. So being able to pull a pound off a weight off the front end of the bike, it's unsprung mass, so it does help, and we're pretty excited about that. Revolutionary stuff available for the market, and we had these tested in a multitude of configurations all throughout the U.S. and California, the Pacific Northwest, Utah, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia. So, they've been tested throughout, and of course here in Texas. So we've been fortunate enough to, we have a ranch that's about 20 minutes from our shop. It's 675 acres, and we've been developing it with, it's got like a pseudo natural grass track, motocross track. It's got single track trails. It's got hard enduro type riding. And then it's got, like 18 miles of, 16 miles of, 2-track roads and unimproved. So it's a perfect testing platform for us to use, as it's got the variety of terrain from everything from hardpack to limestone ledges to sand washes and everything in between.
Nice. So you can, because I if I know something about suspension is like you said, it is just test and test and test. Okay, I'm going to change these shims. Okay, time to go back out. I'm going to do this adjustment. Time to go back out. So
to a certain extent, yeah. So like I said, we do things a little bit differently. So we use data acquisition devices that we will utilize on the bike, and then we also use dyno testing, and then. Dyno testing is not, is definitely not the end all of end all. A lot of companies use dynos to develop their stuff, and they do very little seat of the pants testing. We use it more fine tuning than anything else. So we do all three. We do dyno, data acquisition, and then seat of the pants testing. So it's really well versed. And what I like about that is, we have the hard data, right? Like we have the data to go back to reference back, see the changes in between and, make those improvements that we need to based off of that and the feedback that we get with some of the riders that we work with.
Yeah. It's definitely, you're going to get, I can imagine, everybody's going to feel, oh, I got this suspension done and all this. This is so great, but they don't know that until they jump on the next thing, and then they're like, "Oh, this is so much better."
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and in not so much in the moto community, but definitely in the adventure segment of things, there's a lot of terminology that's used to showcase some products or services, so to speak, within the suspension segment that I wish I could, bring it to the public's attention and really oust them. But, it's not good for anybody. But that's why we like having that data. And with the release of this cartridge kit, we're releasing, we're being 100 transparent, where you're going to see the data, you're going to see the dyno graphs, you're going to see the data acquisition graphs, you're going to see all of that technology, laid out into as much of a layman's term as we can so people can understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with that, I have I have some questions about it, because it's so right now, right, for the 798.90, the standard is go pay WP, I don't even know, it's like $8 or $9 grand for their kit, and then bolt it on your bike and then go. But I don't think a lot of people realize, right? You still need to do work to that, right? It's just
it's so. Those are really nice components. Pro components. They got billet fork lugs, they got treated lowers, they got different seal holders, they got different design upper tubes. You're going from an open chamber to a closed chamber fork. The machining tolerances on those are vastly improved over the OEM components and such like that. So. They are really nice, high-end quality suspension components, but that's just like going to Men's Warehouse and buying a suit, bolting it, and same thing, and putting it on, or going and having a custom tailored suit, is the fit going to be different? Is it going to be properly set, and so on? So, it's one of those things where, pro components, I think the forks are like $3,600. The rear shock's $2,200, and then you still got to go in and if you don't fall into that 165 to 187 pound rider in gear weight, you're looking at a respring possible. Well, if you're spending $6,000 on a proper set of suspension, you might as well get it set up for you. So there's another $1,000 plus some components. So typically, excuse me, typically $7,000. $6,500 to $7,000 when they're properly set up, which is half the cost of the motorcycle, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of those things where we came in and really wanted to develop this cartridge kit and keep it priced in line with as close as we could to what it would cost for a traditional, like, hey, what were we doing before we released this cartridge kit, right? So we were base valves, mid-speed piston, et cetera, et cetera. That came out to this dollar amount. And we wanted to get the cartridge kit to kind of fill that void and be as competitive with just your standard revalve, respring, reseal would cost. Mm-hmm. And then that way we could kind of fill that void, right, between the $6,000 or $7,000 for the pro components, or just go with the traditional revalve, respring, reseal, but then implement the advantages of what we offer with this cartridge kit. And then in retrospect, at that point in time, we're still working on some things, but we have a core exchange program for Kashima coated upper tubes, DLC coated lower tubes, and then anodized fork lugs, right? So like Kashima coating is 6 to 8 weeks turnaround time. So we bought like 12 sets of suspension, or I think it might have been 14 or whatever it is. We have over 10 sets of suspension that are in-house or in rotation at all times. So if you have a 790, 890, we could just literally pull Kashima right off the shelf. We can give you DLC right off the shelf. If you want to have the anodized fork lugs and get that A-kit look and performance, then we could do that by just, pulling the stuff off the shelf rather than having your bike down for 2 months or whatever it may be, waiting for those components to come back.
So let me stop you there on the coating stuff. Why would somebody, like, why is Kashima a big deal, and why is diamond-like coating a big deal? Like, what are the advantages there?
So Kashima coating is a proprietary hard anodizing process. It's done by the Miyake Corporation in Japan. They're the only ones in the world that can do it. So really what the main functionality of Kashima coating is, it's all internals. So the sliding surface that the bushings are sliding on is Kashima is a self-lubricating hard anodizing material. So it allows for it's a much more slippery surface, or, stiction-free zone. Mm-hmm. So really, it is a very high-end coating, and, factory-level riders are typically running, Kashima coating. And the reason for it is the initial movement of the suspension, and we actually have the values for this. So I can't mention it now, but we actually have the values that we're going to release in the press release of OEM setup utilizing the OEM seals and such like that. OEM setup utilizing the SKF dual compound seals, and then Kashima coated uppers, DLC coated utilizing SKF dual compound seals. So we are releasing all of that data to showcase exactly what those values are. But as a rider, what you're going to feel is small bump compliancy. So whether it's a round rock, round modulation in the trail, or square edge hits, let's say 3 inches and under, the amount of force that it requires for your suspension to start that initial movement is reduced by a substantial margin utilizing Kashima coating and DLC. So Kashima coating is of the upper tubes. DLC coating, diamond-like coating, is that black coating that you'll see on the lowers. So it's another process. It's not patented. It's actually done by quite a few companies within the U.S., and the qualities of those vary all over the place. So we've been with our existing DLC coating company for about 4 years now. We've vetted about 8 different ones prior to sticking with the ones that we're with now, and they do an absolutely phenomenal job. And with this company, we've had absolutely zero issues. So It is a coating that is 2.5 microns thick on average. So about a thousandth of a human hair is essentially what it comes out to be. And it is a self-lubricating coating that is also exceptionally hard. So diamond-like. I mean, that's what the name is for. So it's a very hard coating that allows the lower bushing and the fork seal and the dust seal to slide significantly less stiction or friction. That measurement is vastly removed or reduced. So what you feel as a rider is better bump compliancy. So it just allows that suspension to move a lot freer, and it's substantial. It's a substantial data measurement, and we're excited to share that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm definitely curious to see the number, but I think, like you said, is picking up word is what I'm hearing is fire roads that were traveled on by every Jeep in Southern California, and maybe even the mall crawlers that leave those chatter bumps there when I go through.
Yeah, the acceleration bumps coming out of corners and such like that, where it's just clack, 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 clack.
Yeah,
that's so. There's actually some things that come into that are not suspension related, but it is vastly improved. Believe it or not, the biggest thing that is that the acceleration bump specifically is your wheelbase. So where you have your axle and your rear swing arm, and where you have your forks and the triples, and then your tire choice, and then of course tire pressure. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the three things, but the suspension stuff will definitely improve that vastly for sure.
And then once going down the straight or whatever it is, if it's still kind of clapped out, not necessarily the acceleration bump side of it or braking bumps coming in, but just the general stuff, sounds like that's where I might notice a difference too, or we may notice a difference as well.
Oh, for sure. Okay. For sure.
Yeah. So then there's the weight savings that you mentioned earlier. You're saying removing almost about a pound of weight out of that. And I've seen on the 790s and 890s, Rottweiler, who knows a thing or two about KTM, vastly.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Whatever,
Yeah.
I see that they have that kit for the single-sided caliper, just using one caliper with the rotor and all that stuff. So obviously removing the entire weight of a brake line and a caliper.
It's huge.
So
it's huge.
Where would we notice that?
Everywhere.
Okay.
Everywhere. Really, with the weight removal up there as far as that. I mean, I could sit down and calculate out exactly what that would equate into the unsprung mass measurement. But really, like the flop over from center. So like, let's say you're going down a trail and, your bike is perfectly up and down. The amount of force that it will take for you to break that gyroscoping effect of the crank. The initial input is a rider that you have to put into the bike. So, if you're making a right-hand corner, right? Like you're going to weight the right peg, you're going to, push on the right handlebar and kind of get that initial movement going. That's really where you're going to see it. Repetitive chop, you'll see it there. You'll see it everywhere, and it's substantial. So I've ridden, a handful of the Rottweiler 790 builds. Mm-hmm. Wes's bike that he raced at the Sonora, and a couple of the best in the desert races, and that bike is phenomenal. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. In fact, we did. Chris doesn't ever really give me much time to do suspension related stuff, so it's always like, hey. It might be a Monday. You're like, hey, it's Monday, and I need a set of suspension here ready to bolt on a bike on Thursday, and I want you here as well to do, final testing. So, I got to ride the 790 before. So, like, literally, we overnighted some stuff in. I built it. I overnighted it to Chris, and the next morning at 4 a.m, I hop on a plane and I fly to Palm Springs, and they meet me there and we go and test. And I rode that bike and I came back and, I was like, God, man, that was a really expensive ride. And Chris is like, oh, crap. Here we go. I let Alex ride the bike and he takes it out and yard sales it. I was like, no, dude, this is the best bike I've ever ridden in my life. And, Wes was able to achieve what he was able to do at Sonora Rally on that. And, the bike is a phenomenal bike, and not to take away from what Wes is as capable as far as a rider in any sense. He's an absolute
animal.
Animal. He's got that Viking DNA. So, he's an incredible rider and an incredible human being as well. So, it's really, really, it helps quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay. So and it's surprising because I would have thought that I would notice that more or actually almost like not noticed it, but more it's just something that I'm doing the suspension a favor by giving it less mass that it's got to move. I didn't think that I would notice it.
Yeah, you'll definitely notice it. And I have a client in Colorado that did it, and he's a very, very specific rider. This client, and one of the nicest guys in the world, and super cool. And we keep making changes, right? Like it's because his bike is, it started as a rally, and it's, ever evolved into what it is now. And we've had to go in and change some things and kind of complement the changes that he's made to the application. And one of the biggest ones that he did was, removing a front rotor. And he also has a 1290 Super Duke R, and he equated removing the front rotor as strong as going to a carbon wheel set on that bike.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So that's substantial.
Yeah. No, and I know rotating mass. Rotating mass is easy. 1 pound rotating is 2 pounds static.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's okay. So that's huge. Okay, so
yep.
This just turned into a more expensive podcast. So yeah, and I was curious about it, but it's like anything else. Like, okay, cool, let's try it. But am I really going to notice a difference? Before we go full send? Because a lot of people, and we know this in adventure bike riding, and I am absolutely guilty of it. Is you're like, well, they did it, maybe I should do it. I don't know what it's going to do.
For sure.
But he did it, so I should do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I say is, that you notice it is, I notice it. Majority of my clients notice it, but there's a lot of people that are not as sensitive, and that's kind of one of the things with suspension that's super unique. Is I could have like 5 guys, they all ride together, they all ride the same bike, they all live in the same area, and we could do a setup for them and such like that, and you'll literally have 5 different opinions on the suspension. So it's such a subjective nature to things, and that's I think one of the things that's led to the success of us in this segment of motorcycles is we've made the investments in the costly tooling and the data acquisition materials and such like that, and so it takes that subjective opinion out of it to a certain degree, which is, one of the things that I find super valuable. But when it comes to certain things as, bike setup, chassis setup, and such like that, there's a lot of people that are running out there that have improper setups. Like we go to these rallies and we go to these things, and it's like, you'll see a guy that's 360 pounds that's, got 100 pounds of luggage on the back end of his bike, and he's got his wife that's, 200 pounds or 150 pounds sitting on the back end of the bike. And it's like, you're riding on stock springs, where like the moto guys at the minimum, moto guys, the first thing they do when they get a bike, or even before they get the bike, is they get the proper springs for the stuff and, at least go from there. So this segment's a little bit different. It takes a little bit more on our end. It's a little bit more of an educational thing than most.
I could totally, and to speak to that, and this is an experience that I had with you, and obviously when it comes to anything like suspension and bike tech and stuff like that, I nerd out on. But sure. When we were at the Hare and Hound, it was a few months back, where Wes showed up, Chris and everybody to race it. You were there. And I remember Wes came back and was like, and he goes, okay. And then, laid this thing over, you whipped out the screwdriver, some clicks, some magic, some blah, blah, blah. And then, okay, go take it. And then he goes and wrings this thing's neck up the start, comes back and goes, perfect.
Yeah.
That takes, like, to me, that's like, okay, that obviously that's somebody that knows, because those clicks could go in either direction and go to worse very quickly.
There's definitely a placebo effect going on there. I learned this.
Let me get that bleep thing going, because if Chris listens to this, or Wes,
no. I mean, Wes is a super easy guy to please as far as like setup. Like he's such a talented rider, and Wes grew up kind of riding, what he had and, what was given to him and such like that. So to make Wes happy, it's really easy. I've worked with a lot of riders where it's the exact opposite. And, I've been really fortunate to work with some really talented riders. And, there's some bullshit aspects. Mm-hmm. And then there's not. And so when you're testing with somebody, like when I do a hands-on, test and tune day with a guy, or a team or whoever it may be, you'll kind of get into this rhythm of we're always looking for improvements, but you also have to find out, we make so many changes to a bike in a testing day, right? We may change static rider, fork position, so on. It's really easy for some people to get lost and kind of forget where baseline is. So what I say by the placebo effect is, one of the things that I do consistently, and I've learned this from other suspension tuners, is, if you have a test day, you've been working with the guy for 2 or 3 hours, he'll come in and he's like, hey, it's doing this, it's doing that. I think it could be improved here. Leave him on the bike. Make it look like you're changing some adjustments, hey, I may make some clickers here, click it there. I have a snap-on, rotating wrench or screwdriver that I just recently got. I'll even stick it in there and I'll kind of make it so it makes the sounds like I'm actually changing something. Mm-hmm. And I'll go, hey, go try that. And he'll pound out 2 or 3 laps and he'll come back and he's like, dude, you solved it. It's perfect. And in reality, we use that as the BS baseline, right? To kind of always make sure of where they're at and such like that.
Yeah. Well, and I could see, so that's another 1 lap, 2 lap, okay, 3 lap, okay, 4 lap, now testing. Your 5th lap, unless you're upper echelon, I would think, the body's a little bit more fatigued, your hands,
for sure.
So
for sure.
It's difficult to get a clean read on okay, now it's doing this. Yeah, but it wasn't doing it on lap 1, but now it is.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where keeping really accurate notes and, filming things and such like that really come into play.
So I got really a couple more, but Huck valve. Where am I going to notice that? You mentioned it, but what,
So the Huck valve system is a bottoming control device. So, you have a few aspects within the fork that are designed to help control bottoming. Mm-hmm. Oil volume with the fork, or also known as air gap within the fork. Mm-hmm. That's one aspect of tuning. The high speed compression stack is also an area where you keep that in check. Proper springs, obviously, kind of baseline 101. But really what the Huck valve is it's a needle and orifice. So at the end of the cartridge rod, there's actually a needle. And at the top of the base valve, there is a bottoming cup. Now, that bottoming cup is actually a pseudo piston. There's actually some orifices down at the very bottom of it. And below that is a shim stack. So as the fork gets to a certain position in the stroke, that needle is going to go into that bottoming cup and start creating a hydraulic lock. Or in this case, it's more of like a piston. So it will push fluid to a certain degree, and then it'll max out, and that's what controls your bottoming. And it's a separate tuning element that is, so what's really neat about it is it allows us to kind of run a lighter compression stack and give you more compliance in, the chop and such like that, but still have the bottoming resistance on the other side. Okay. And that's not found in any other fork.
Okay. So So to me, what I'm picturing is down the road, Baja, a little bit faster than I should be, and I happen to find a hole that I didn't account for.
It'll just soak it up. I mean, to a certain degree. Yeah, of course, to a certain degree. I have to be very clear on that.
Yes. Yeah, because writer talent is very different here, and I'm not the greatest writer, but I mean that's I think that is the confidence thing, right? I mean, in knowing, like, I would tell people when I was at BMW when we were talking ride modes, right? And compared to the 790, the BMW stuff is dialed into where you just set it to something and then just go. And you know, but when you put a 790 in rally mode, now you've got slip that you can calculate. The throttle modes, the way they react are very different. And I would always tell people, go pick the same track, go hit the same exact route, little 2-mile loop,
same line, same speed.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. I use that analogy with suspension setup as well.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you would encourage anybody, like, after you get your suspension done, go do that.
Absolutely. And in our instruction booklet that comes with our suspension is that is actually said in that, because it's if you're not savvy, you could really quickly start chasing your tail real quick. And so it's, if you're ever evolving, I mean, there's a lot of people that can do it. There's some people that can't. And so, if you start making significant changes, specifically front and rear at the same time, the front affects the rear affects the front. So if you start making all kinds of adjustments, you could really throw the balance off of the bike really quickly.
Yeah. Well, and not only what I've noticed, I guess it rings true, is like simply with the number of clicks. I mean, some things it's like 45 clicks total adjustment that you can do, and so or more or less or whatever it is. But it seems like you could get lost, like you said, you could get lost pretty quickly. And then some stuff is clicks, some stuff is turns.
That's it gets, and how they're counted is also different. Like preload is counted differently than suspension clickers, and people forget that, and it's so it's the documentation that's coming with these cartridges. It's very similar to what's found on our website now, and just a little bit more specific to this cartridge kit itself, but. We encourage people to follow that process and go through it and, really experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then that's, I guess, how you're going to get to know the whole thing.
For sure.
Yeah. So this is the one that I thought or the question that I had for you that I think would probably help a lot of people. But, okay, so I'm getting ready to send my suspension to you. And I've already asked you a couple questions about it previously for my stuff, but what do you want to hear from us? When it comes to setting up the suspension, what I've already done, what are the questions? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, so a lot of that is based off of the information that we attain via the rider profile form on our website. So, we're offering this kit in 3 different configurations. So the cartridge kit is, more of like a do-it-yourself install, because it's actually a relatively easy install. So if somebody's mechanically inclined, if they want to buy it from us or one of our participating dealers, there's going to be, we're actually filming the video this upcoming weekend. So, there'll be instructional information, a video, etc. So we're going to have a do-it-yourself kit that's going to include the cartridges, the proper spring rates, cartridges, proper spring rates, SKF dual compound fork seals, Maxima fork fluid, and then Motion Pro tooling to install that kit. The secondary way is send it into us. We'll set that specifically to your specifications as far as valving, such like that. And then at that time, you could use the A kit upgrade, which you're doing with the DLC and the Kashima coated uppers. And then the third way that we're going to offer it is to tuners. So, just raw cartridges, or not raw, but cartridges themselves, they could supply their own fork springs and such like that. And then they could use our platform. But for people that are going to have us tune it to their specifications, that rider profile form, which is the same thing that you filled out, tells us everything we need to know.
Okay. And so, like anything else, this is not the DMV, so you don't need to lie about your height or your weight.
You know, there's two questions on there that are bullshit questions that really allow us to gauge how honest people are being with us. And so I'm not going to say which ones they are.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, don't give it away.
Yeah. There's two questions on there. And, I mean, I'm not trying to paint a bad picture of people, but, like there's people that are, kind of new to the sport and they want to have a setup that they could grow into. And they think that being, kind of getting to where they want to be as far as a skill set might be the better setup for them. Or we have just the guys that are, the fastest guys around the campfire and such like that. And that's where those questions can come into play and, really allow us to gauge, how honest we are. And then, if we have questions, we, approach them as delicately as we can.
Yeah. And I guess for the people that are listening, I would, and probably you as well, would encourage people to be as honest as possible with like your rider ability, what you're going to jump.
Because that's good. Yeah, because it's it might negatively or most likely will negatively affect the suspension performance that you're going to get.
Yeah.
If like the setup that Wes requires is not the same setup that I require, which is not the same setup that you require, and so if I was to write a setup for Wes, like it probably be harsh and just beat the hell out of me because I'm not going anywhere near the speeds or the velocities that he's hitting. Yeah. And so on.
And I feel like that is a very big point with how the bike feels. And I noticed it with adventure bike riders when it comes to picking tires. When going into Baja, everybody wanted to run those dirt tires, 50-50, super aggressive knobbies. And I'm going, wait, I've been down there. It's mostly highway to where you're going. Yeah. So I feel like it's kind of the same way as like, oh, I'm going to be doing a lot of dirt riding and a lot and this and that and the other. And at the end of the day, it's really not. And it's really just fire roads. But then they end up with a suspension setup for what they asked for. And it's harsh or.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Not compliant. Yep.
Yeah. And somebody I think once had told me is the fire roads with the chatter in them are hell on a suspension setup. Big holes aren't that bad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think people realize that, right?
I mean, it's like a really good way that we're able to gauge. Well, this could go two ways. So if a rider services his suspension regularly, we could very easily tell the caliber of rider that he is. So we have a rider here in Texas that does the Texas Enduro Championship Series, Ryan Grantham. He is he overalls. He beats Cole Kirkpatrick and Russell Bobbitt, and it's super fast guy. He destroys his fork fluid and his bushings in 5 hours of ride time. 5 hours. 5 hours. This stuff is roached. I mean, milky, and I mean bushings are just shot and everything in between. And in fact, I gave him Kashima and DLC uppers in a Kashima and DLC coated shock shaft just to help extend some of his fluid life because he just moved up to New Mexico. He got a new job, and the service intervals are going to be a little bit longer. So just to help save him some funds and time without his suspension, we upgraded him. But we have guys that could destroy. Guys like Skylar and Ricky and Andrew Short and those guys. I mean, they're just destroying their stuff. They're the immortals of the motorcycle world. These guys are they're so fast and they're so while they're super smooth, they're just they're utilizing their components in the way that they're designed to be. And then we have that's the one thing that's a little bit different in the adventure segment is you have guys that are new to the sport that take some training or go out and they ride with some other guys with similar skill sets, and they might think that they're an intermediate or expert level rider, and then you work with a guy like Wes or his dad Daryl, right? Right? Daryl's a savage human being. I mean, he's the nicest guy in the world and a teddy bear, but he's a gruff dude and he rides a motorcycle like an absolute wild man. And the spread between those guys and So servicing your suspension regularly is important. I completely went on a way side tangent, so I do apologize.
No.
But, suspension, the fluid can get distorted really quickly, really fast. Depending on the application that you're on, like Honda Africa Twins, like the stock suspension is so antiquated and the quality of the components is not the best, and the fluids that they're using is really not that great. So that fluid gets distorted within the first 10, 15 hours of ride time. And then you have a guy that might ride 10,000, 15,000 miles on that bike and then have his suspension serviced. And I mean, it's like once a day, Jerry's in the back and he'll open up a set. And all the windows get open, the door goes open. Cause the fluid that's on a daily basis, just roast, and it smells like, Japanese suspension fluid smells like rotten fish when it gets roached real quick. So
it sounds like gear oil to me. Yeah,
exactly.
Burnt gear oil.
Yep.
Yeah, it has a certain je ne sais quoi on the nostrils.
Yeah, you don't forget it. That's for sure.
No. So and that was actually some too, because even on I remember you told me when I sent my forks in for the 850 when I first got the 850 GS, we were looking to see what we could do with it, and you said how many miles are on this?
Yep.
I think I had 2,000 miles on it, and you said it looked pretty bad. So
yeah, and that's just the initial break-in, and then the quality of materials, and in this segment of motorcycles, most manufacturers are cutting corners on components, and they're making things as least inexpensive as they can, and KTM did that for a brief period of time, and they're back to utilizing at least decent materials and decent components. But and let's say 2013 through 18 690 Enduro, and 13 through 18 1190R. I broke 3 frames on an 1190 riding it, and there's all kinds of suspension related issues that were caused by that, and KTM learned, and they are going in the proper direction, thankfully, and making some high quality components. But not all the manufacturers are like that.
Yeah, no, and it's when they got to crank out 50 sets of forks in an hour. I learned this recently too. I guess that all manufacturers are guilty of this, but fork fluid height is very important. And is actually a tuning aspect.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I've also learned recently that I guess they're inconsistent too.
Oh, absolutely, and that just varies during the assembly process. There's a bleeding procedure, and it varies. Some are done off volume, so depending on the style of fork. Like a 4CS fork. The 4CS fork, which is kind of like the worst fork that WP ever made. You would put 500 cc's in the bottom of the fork. You'd put the base valve in. You'd pour 200 cc's up on top. You'd put the fork cap on. You'd pressurize it to 165 psi. Take the fork cap back off. Set the oil level height, and such like that. And so some forks have pretty intricate bleeding procedures. Some don't. But if you're producing, 1,000 sets of suspension a day, or whatever these manufacturers are, there's a term that we use in the shop is factory loose. So it's pretty common to open a set of suspension, and there might be some things loose. There might be some things that are folding around in your suspension. It's even on some of the pro components, when the rallies first started coming out, we had 6 or 7 sets of 790 rally suspension in the shop at one time. They all kind of came in at once, and every single one of them was mismanufactured or misassembled. Yeah. And so, factory loose is what we call it.
My brother works at a bike shop, and he told me about the carbon torque spec, which is tighten until you hear the crack and then back it off a quarter turn.
Yeah, I don't know.
So it sounds like
we have some pretty high end. Put it this way: our Snap-on guy buys us lunch every Wednesday. We got we spend some money on some equipment and tooling, and being able to confidently. And the torque wrenches that we have are all, they keep a data log and all of that. So, those are things that we audit and just make sure that the guys in the back are on point.
Nice. Well, well, then again, there's a reason why you're at where you're at now, and it's because of all of that kind of stuff. So that's,
consistency and stuff like that is it's key.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I just learned is that when you do a 600-mile service on an adventure bike, you should probably maybe look at doing the fork fluid as well.
Possibly. It's dependent on the forks, but there's a lot of materials moving. There's a lot of metal on metal, and that initial break-in, just like in your engine, it's going to slough some material, right? Yeah. You change your oil the first time. There's pieces of metal in there, and most of my KTM's always shed a little bit of material. It's just kind of what they are, and your suspension's doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I don't know why people would think that it wouldn't do that.
Suspension is like the most neglected thing on motorcycles. It really is. When we were up in Washington State, there was a time where just the shop was every day the bikes were getting in and out, and I sat there one night and I'm looking at all these bikes and I'm like, kind of just looking bikes over, and I'm like, dude, there's like $700,000 worth of motorcycles sitting in the shop right now with the way these bikes are equipped, and all of them had everything done to them, and the last thing they were doing was suspension. And then, once they do that, the very next bike they get, it's always they do suspension first and then do the rest of the crap later.
Yeah. I came across a few of those. It's like where they didn't miss a page in the catalog. The catalog. Yeah, of the catalog. Not one.
For sure.
Not a single page was missed in the making of this bike.
Absolutely.
And I have, and I told you, this, for me personally, as much as I know how big a deal suspension is, this is the first time I'm actually said, okay, I'm going to invest the money on making a bike that has the perfect suspension.
Even we tried it on your 850. We just couldn't do anything for that bike. It just couldn't
be done. Yeah,
couldn't be done.
There's cartridge kits coming for it and all sorts of stuff going on. And cool, that is definitely still a different bike. Now having both, literally I could ride either one tomorrow, where initially I thought the 850 was like, hey, this is, okay, yeah, I like this thing off-road. It's got the right weight, feels pretty good. But then you jump on the KTM and going, no, that's not true.
I get to ride every bike out there. That's, one of the perks of the job. And, the 790 is the first KTM that I've ever ridden that I just didn't jive with immediately. It took me 300 miles to really jive with that bike. And then, we set the ergos, we did the seat, we did, did all the stuff that I need to do. And, that bike is just so much fun. It's, rarely do I get to ride where it's not business related, right? I'm always testing or trying something or, whatever it may be. And, we did a ride at a junction, which is 2 hours away from the shop, and it's still in hill country, and the most beautiful spring-fed creeks I've ever seen. The bluest water I've ever seen in my life. It was just jaw-dropping, and we did this 280-something mile ride out of there, and I still get a grin on my face because I had a smile on my face the entire day and that 790 is, I didn't jive with it at first because I thought it was underpowered. I thought it was super compact and, a smaller chassis. And, it took me a while to kind of jive with it, but man, that bike is so much fun. So much fun.
This is really turning into an expensive pot. I got a feeling in 2 weeks I'm not going to be just doing suspension. I might be looking for somewhere to live.
Well, we've been talking about that. You need to come out here. Yeah. Austin's. It's different. There's pros and cons for sure, but there's a lot of cool things about Texas and the terrain, the people, the food. Everything and anything is. It's different, right? It's different, and if it jives with you, cool. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it's a lot of fun for sure. Living out here has been really good for us.
Nice. So it sounds like it was like you say, it was the right move.
For sure.
You would have hindsight. Texas probably would have been the first choice then. Now knowing what you know.
I think I think living in the Pacific Northwest was instrumental in the success that we've seen. Okay. So I think it was definitely the right move. But it's living here now is definitely perfect for us, for sure.
Nice.
Well, yeah. And your boss was actually at our ranch.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was looking at purchasing it. Yeah.
Wait, no.
Yeah.
Don't.
No, it's not. Now, let me rephrase this. Like, here in Texas, we have these things called land leases. So, like, I have access to do whatever I want to this property. I wish it was mine, but I do not own the ranch. And I guess Elon was out there at some point inquiring about it.
Taking a look.
Yeah. Gotcha. So, at least that's the rumor I've been told.
Well, I don't. It's funny. I now. Without divulging too much, but yeah, the boss. I get a lot of people that ask me like, "Oh, I heard he's doing this and that," and you know what? It's he's a fan of stuff that's like decentralized. So we don't even find out a lot of stuff that's going on, and then all of a sudden, we know about it.
Sure.
Right when the public finds out, which is kind of cool, and it's kind of nice to see a company that, as big as it is, it's very agile. So,
for sure. For sure. Well, being the richest man in the world, it allows you to do things that are not possible.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Well, today, let's see. We're moving to Texas. Sell everything in California.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Enjoy.
Yep.
Yeah, but nice. Well, this is, I definitely am excited to be out there in a few weeks and get a shop tour, take a look around, and then just kind of see how all of this stuff goes together. Like I said, I'm a total nerd on this stuff. But I do not understand motorcycle suspension. A car, I could tell you compression, rebound, and but not.
It's the same thing, just done a little bit differently. So we'll get you up to par real quick.
Yeah. So that'll be awesome. And then, is this something? So you mentioned about test and tune and stuff like that. Do you ever get a group of guys and or people that are
all
interested?
the time?
Okay, and
all
then
the time.
You'll come out. You can come out or whatever.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That'd be really cool to
absolutely
put something together.
Yeah, we got a snap-on travel toolbox that I take, and I hop on a plane, and it's got everything I need. And we go to. I mean, I've been able to travel the country doing that, so nice. It's pretty neat.
Nice. Well, yeah. If that's ever, if you ever put a calendar together for that or anything like that, I would love to relay that information because that's, it's probably one of the least, like you said, is one of the most neglected components on the motorcycle, but yet it affects how far you can ride in a day and then safety wise too.
For sure. Fatigue, safety, I mean, everything.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I did it once and I asked you right away and you told me, oh yeah, just take a ton of rebound, speed the rebound up on the bike a lot. But fire roads that are chattery can be a handful on a big bike.
Oh yeah.
You'll end up outside of the corner very quickly because you have zero traction. The tire's not on the ground.
I did that on our 790. It was related to the brake issues, but I literally went into a corner at like 70 miles an hour, and I was Fred Flintstoning it, dragging my feet, trying to slow down going into a corner. So, yeah. it's yeah.
So how was your life in those 10 seconds? You reviewed the whole thing?
You get kind of used to doing that. Us bigger guys on these small bikes, you got to put the cooler and you got to run the I've learned that the brake tech piston calipers cool it quite a bit and help a lot. So I've, us bigger guys, you got to set up a bike appropriately at times.
Well, yeah, but we do have the advantage. We do get more weight on the ground when it comes to traction.
No, for sure.
So.
Yeah, like I could go through the rocks faster than most. That's for sure.
Yep. I've recently I won a bet that way at a local, grassroots motocross type event. I put money on the big guy and nobody believed me. And I'm going, he'll be the first to the corner. And
for sure.
Sure as shit.
For sure. Yep.
So,
well, awesome,
dude. I really appreciate taking the time.
Yeah,
man.
likewise. This was fun. Catching up is always fun, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I'll be out there in a couple weeks, and we'll get some beers or adult beverages.
There you go.
Yeah, in moderate amount. Yep.
Exactly.
Sweet.
All right,
Alex.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you.
Likewise.
All
Bye.
Right. See you. Bye. All right. So that was awesome. I learned a lot, man. Hour 45 minutes almost in the episode. So a little bit of issues early on. Still getting used to the new equipment, but I hope everybody enjoyed the sound. I think that this is a lot better quality now. We're able to bring more people on and get it a little bit clearer across. So I am absolutely excited. I'm going to Texas in a couple of weeks to get the suspension worked on my bike. Like I said, if you guys see me on the news, it's because I walked into an airport with a case that looks like it was holding something else. But I promise there's suspension inside. So this is my declaration before I fly, just in case we need it for evidence later. But in the end, I've now, in talking to Alex and working on all this stuff, and I think he's correct. I've set up a lot of bikes and built a lot of bikes, but always the suspension has been the last thing to do, but without realizing how big of a deal it is for motorcycles and for your enjoyment. First bike I ever rode was actually a KX that was a KX 250 set up by Precision Concepts. Nowhere sprung for me or anything, but you could literally tell the bike had valving work and there was some magic inside those. So ever since then, I've been chasing it. I just never dedicated it to saying, okay, that's it. I'm going to do it like this time for the 790. So again, I'm super looking forward to it. I'm going to learn a lot. This thing is absolutely crazy. What Alex has designed and worked with on these guys to make it for him. So it is, I'm ready. Is it 2 weeks now? So with that being said, episode number 12 of the Chasing Waypoints podcast. I'm going to post this up on Facebook. If you're not following us on Facebook, jump up on Facebook, like this Chasing Waypoints Facebook page. You'll see it there. Drop a comment below. If you've got questions, we'll tag Alex in it. I'm sure he'll help us out with answering any of the questions that we may have about it. Follow us on Instagram as well, Chasing Waypoints _official. Also on YouTube, you'll find us under Chasing Waypoints. And if you like the podcast, you like what you heard, give us a like, a follow, or maybe even share it. And that is going to be the episode for this. We will see you guys next Sunday.